So again, welcome. My name is Amelia Heatley. I'm Director of Diversity and Engagement at an organisation called Electrolink. For those who may have visual issues, I have dark hair. I am wearing a headset, a blue jumper, and I have a silver necklace on. I have dark hair and dark eyes. And I'll hand over to Louise, who will introduce herself.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Louise Parry. I'm Director of People at an organisation called Energy and Utility Skills. Today, I have a snoring dog in the background, so hopefully you can't hear him. But I am wearing a white top. I have shoulder-length blonde hair and blue eyes. And yeah, really looking forward to sharing the EDI Health Index results with you shortly.
And good afternoon, everyone. My name is Colin Sloman. I'm from a company called Cognition, and I'm the Chief Strategy Officer there. We are the sort of technology partner for the health check, and last year we developed a platform for capturing the health index information, and we'll be doing that again today, and I'll be showing a demo a little bit later of what that will look like. I'm a older man with no hair, glasses, and I'm wearing a black polo top. Back to you, Amelia.
Thank you very much, Colin. Okay, so let's dive in. So my part of this session is to give a little bit of a background to the EDI Health Index. I'll be talking through what it is, how it works, although Colin will be giving a much more thorough example, a demonstration on the details of that, but also why it's important that we all take part. So to start with, where did the EDI Health Index come from? The Health Index was part of an initiative of TIDE, which is a cross-cutting initiative looking to promote EDI within the energy sector. One of the things that was very important to the people such as Ofgem and Energy UK and others who founded the organisation, was that we thought about what data we could collect and how we can use that data to improve EDI within the sector. However, one of the we took that kind of concept to a conference, and we talked about how best that could be managed. Now, we talked about the fact that there's actually quite a lot of initiatives, and Louise leads a very important one, which is collecting the EDI data itself. But what was lacking was a bit of a picture about where we are and how we're progressing in EDI across the energy sector, that's looking at everything, not just simply one aspect of EDI, but looking at the picture on the whole. So we took away the feedback that we received. We learned a lot from it. We very much wanted to make sure that we weren't duplicating any efforts, and that we were actually building on something that added a new aspect to this view of EDI in the energy sector. So we learned a lot from those discussions, and we decided that the best way to do this was to kind of create a simple health index that allows us to measure where different companies are focusing their EDI efforts and how progressed they are with that. We then launched the first health index in April 2024. We presented the findings of that first run in the EDI conference in June 2024. So what is the health index? Well, primarily it's a baseline tool for any company to use and learn from, regardless of where they are on their EDI journey. The results from it is a way in which TIDE can use consolidated data to help the sector establish where it is in relation to EDI best practice. So it's not about identifying individual companies and exactly where they are in their particular EDI journey, but more about creating an overall picture about where there are strengths and weaknesses and how the energy sector on a whole is performing. It's also a means to identify pockets of best practice that other organisations can learn from. So we use the health index, and we ask people who are demonstrating best practice to be willing to share that best practice with others, so that we don't have to reinvent the wheel every time, and that people who are doing particularly well can share their guidance and provide that through the TIDE platform. Importantly, it's also about what it's not. So this isn't a sophisticated maturity assessment. Those exist in the market already. There are many companies that offer the service of coming into your organization, taking information from you and providing a sophisticated maturity assessment. This is much more about the bigger picture and understanding those top line data points that we can then use to look across the sector on a whole. It's not an EDI data collection point, so we won't be asking anybody for any data around particular characteristics. It is all just about the initiatives that are taking place in organizations. We have no intention of creating a league table, so this isn't about creating winners and losers. This is more about giving us the overall picture. So yes, we don't, through this, identify any individual's company's performance. It's not specific to any strand of diversity. It's entirely inclusion focused. So it's looking across the whole view of EDI. And it's not a tool that requires an extensive understanding of data or EDI knowledge in order to take part. How it works, again, as I said, Colin's going to give a really detailed explanation of how this works later on and actually show you the tool live, which will be exciting. But what this does is we've taken 4 themes, which are external, strategy, internal, and people. We've then broken down each theme into 3 topics. So for example, for the external category, we look at corporate social responsibility, marketing and customer service, and procurement. Whereas people, we're looking at issues such as attraction and retention and promotion, job design and compensation, and then work-life integration, flexibility, and benefits. For each of those topics, there are then 2 statements that are based on, we did a lot of work looking at best practice and then deciding what 2 statements we think will best help us measure our success in these spaces. And then we ask you to self-assess against those statements. So there is no right and wrong. It's about understanding where you feel as a company you are performing. You are then given a set of scores in which to measure yourself against, ranging from inactive to best practice. So let's just have a quick look through what those look like. So inactive, that means that the work or action isn't even on your radar yet. You haven't considered it and it's not been started. Then you've got reactive. That's about the actions being considered, will be started soon, but potentially more of a compliance mindset. So what do you have to do rather than what you could do? You then move into the proactive space. This means that some work or action is underway. And there's a good understanding within the organization of the value of that work. Progressive. This means it's been actually progressed to the point of business as usual, and has been given some time to embed within the organization, and therefore you're starting to see improvements and results as a result of that effort. And then finally, best practice. This is where you feel your organization is an exemplar in this space. So it's something that you'd be willing to talk about externally and share with others to help others to learn and progress along their journey. So now, looking at why it's important. Well, mainly it's important because for change to happen, we need to commit to this as a sector as a whole. And there are lots of value that we believe come from being part of the health index, both for the sector, but also for individuals. So from a sector perspective, taking part in this will allow Tide to have a picture of the gaps that exist in our sector and then help us to target our efforts to upskill. So this means that if there are particular areas that we can see across the board that people feel that they're performing less well in, Tide can take on initiatives to run webinars, to provide additional support, share best practice case studies to help people to progress in that space. It's also important because it allows us to measure progression. So this has been as I said, this is the 2nd year that we're going to be running this health index. So we're hoping to see that from last year that some of the the dial has been moved forward, and we're actually we can celebrate that success as well as sharing that best practice, as I said. And from your perspective, it's a really good opportunity to take a bit of a step back from what you're doing in this space and understand where you yourself could target your own company's learning. It'll also allow you to benchmark your company against a wider sector whilst not identifying individual companies. So as you can see from Louise, well, you will see very shortly from Louise's update on the results from last year, you can see where others are doing better, others are doing less well, and where you are in that scale. And on that basis, I shall hand over to Louise, who's going to take us through the findings.
So as Amelia's outlined, this is very much a self-assessment, so rating our organisations against those 5 levels, against each of the 24 statements within the 4 themes that Amelia has outlined. So from that inactive, where the work in the question area has not been yet considered, through to that best practice, where rating ourselves as exemplary or demonstrating best practice, and we're very happy to share with others. In summarising the results from 2024, 59 organisations registered their interest to participate, and 37 of those participated in the Health Index. And in summarising those results, there are some really encouraging areas of best practice, in areas including having that nominated person and a strategy in place for EDI, that we're embracing opportunities for flexibility, both in terms of time and place, in an equitable way across organisations, and in encouraging employees to be involved in EDI to provide input into related initiatives. And organisations are widely working to ensure their communications are accessible and inclusive, both internally and externally. However, 1 in 10 of the Health Index respondent organisations are inactive in setting EDI goals as a priority. Responding organisations are also reactive in training hiring teams and managers in hiring practices. And across all related statements, there are high levels of inactivity in ensuring diversity across our supply chains. So I'll go into a little bit more depth into those themes for you. So who participated, or which organisations participated? Over 50% of responding organisations, the individuals responding on the behalf of those organisations, were working in EDI or in HR. And 57% of those organisations are over 250 employees big, and recognising that 21% are from organisations with less than 50 employees, it's key to note some of those organisational differences and contexts. For example, we're very much less likely to see employee resource groups in our SME environment. We can also see good representation, transmission and distribution, supply and retail and services, but less so in generation. They made up just 11% of those organisations responding to the Tide Health Index. So I'm not going to go into great depth. I'm just going to provide an overview of the results by each of those 4 themes, and we'll continue to communicate regularly as we head towards the results, which will be launched this year in July 2025 at the same EDI conference. So if we look at the theme of strategy, 62% of responding organisations are rating their organisations as proactive and progressive in this area. 17% rate their organisations as leading practice, with particularly strong performance in organisations that have that nominated person responsible for EDI strategy and programmes. And there's also strong performance in having an EDI strategy, mission and vision in place that's been communicated to all employees. However, 1 in 10 respondents have rated their organisations as inactive in terms of having those strategic EDI goals in place. And as Amelia outlined, I lead on the inclusion measurement framework across the sector, which looks at EDI data and leading inclusion, and that's also reflected in results from that in 2024. Next slide, please, Amelia. People, so 67% of responding organisations are rating themselves as proactive and progressive, and 10% in this respect leading practice. So there's lower levels of inactivity in this area, with 21% of organisations rating their organisations as reactive and inactive at 2%. There is strong performance in organisations embedding flexibility in an equitable way across their organisations, and good performance in terms of having processes in place to ensure hiring and promotion practices are equitable and inclusive, and regularly reviewing rewards and benefits to ensure that they're also inclusive. But nearly 1 in 3 were reactive in terms of training their hiring teams and their hiring managers, which well could impact the diversity of new entrants into the sector. Internal, 59% of organisations are proactive or progressive in this area, but the same as the people theme, 21% of organisations are rating themselves as reactive in this area. 12% are leading practice, and there's strong performance in organisations encouraging employees to discuss EDI and provide input to initiatives, and encouraging cultural celebrations like Ramadan at the moment and organisation-wide activities. Organisations are ensuring their communications are accessible and inclusive, which is great, both internally and externally. And 43% rate their organisations as inactive or reactive in measuring and analysing employee diversity and inclusivity data throughout the employment life cycle. So clearly an area to focus on. And nearly 1 in 3 are inactive in measuring employees to include EDI goals in their objectives. So perhaps reflective that this isn't a strategic priority for organisations and the sector. So external, 57% of organisations have rated themselves as proactive or progressive in this area. But like the internal theme and the people theme, 21% have rated their organisations as reactive. And notably, particularly in this area, 17%, so quite a bit higher, have rated their organisations as inactive in this area. There's plenty of progressive actions against having sustainability or ESG agenda, which recognises EDI and the links to EDI. But 1 in 5 respondents rate their organisations as inactive in that area. And the results show that marketing and communications represent and reflect diverse communities, and organisations clearly do identify and respond to societal issues that align with their mission and vision. But there are high levels of inactivity relating to ensuring diversity in the supply chain, particularly noting the levels of organisations that are saying they are committed to it. So in launching the Health Index last year, these results have provided that baseline, and as Amelia's touched on, we can look to see it progress made in the 2025 results. It also enables us to celebrate and share best practice, which Amelia's also touched on, and really as coming together as a sector to focus the areas we can really concentrate on. It's a maturity model. It aligns, it provides those insights into EDI activity and can help us measure the impact. But what we can also see is the connectivity into the inclusion measurement framework, which I've touched on, which helps measure the diversity characteristics of our organisation. So what impact is it having in terms of diverse talent entering the sector? Are we retaining and progressing diverse talent in our organisations through the activities that we're doing and are measuring through the Health Index? We'll be sharing the results of both the EDI Index, Health Index, and also the energy-specific results from the Inclusion Measurement Framework, so you can see the interdependencies of both of those at the conference in July. Next slide, please, Amelia. So let's have a look at those areas we can celebrate. We can celebrate in terms of the strategy theme, that nominated person for EDI and having EDI strategies in place. In terms of the people theme, we are across the sector embracing opportunities to embed flexibility. And internal, we can encourage employees. We are very much encouraging our employees to be involved in EDI, having access to EDI learning, and we are recognising and celebrating cultural celebrations and organisation-wide activities. And from an external lens, we are ensuring that our communications are accessible and inclusive. Next slide. Areas where we can collaborate and share that best practice. So let's share some of our EDI strategies, and let's have a look at how our leaders are engaging with EDI issues. What can we do to work together on those areas? In terms of people, how we can review and act on inequalities in those rewards and benefits. Let's learn from organisations that are managing this really well. There is areas that we can focus on in terms of job requirements and descriptions, but that equitable hiring and promotion, how we do educate our hiring managers and our teams in recruiting in a diverse way, and that training. Accessible and inclusive communications, how we can do that more widely, and how we absolutely ensure that our external communications and events represent and reflect the communities that our organisation serves, and the diversity in our local communities. Next slide, please, Amelia. But what the results show us also, as well as the great things we can celebrate and work together on, are the areas we need to focus on. So how can we really engage employees on EDI in things like performance objectives? And how can we improve the measurement of diversity across our organisations and across the sector? How can we ensure in our organisations that we're setting strategic EDI goals rather than necessarily in-year goals? But also in our organisations, lots of employees across the sector are in the supply chain. So how do we engage the supply chain into the conversations about diversity? How do we potentially hold them to account and get them committed to diversity? But also how we can more widely do market testing with a diverse customer base and diverse stakeholder engagement too. And to hand over now to Colin, who's going to give you a live demo.
Thanks, Louise and Amelia. I'm going to replace the current share. Hopefully, can I get a thumbs up when you tell me you can see the screen?
We can see.
Wonderful. Insert. So I'm just going to quickly talk you through the tool that we use, which is our Cognition platform, and how we collect the data. So once you've got a nominated individual, one from each of your participating organizations, we get your email address. We look after your data privacy very carefully, and you'll get a link to the Cognition platform, and you'll see this particular program. You can see there are three different tiles. First one is the health index. Here's a bit of information about cognition. And also we capture an opportunity to share best practice. So for example, if you're showing up as a leading practitioner in one area, we've created an area where you can actually suggest your best practice and share it. And that looks a little bit like this. So what under each of the topics, you can fill in a form here and be willing to share and perhaps become if you like, a poster representative of a great example. So those are the three tiles. If I just focus on the health index itself, when you start that first tile, you get this screen. We will go through a few bits of information about data privacy, and we're going to just introduce you to Rumi, who's your sort of guide for this. And also going to tell you a little about the health index and with an overview. So you'll click through a little dialogue with Rumi, and she's going to explain a little bit about how the index works. You've heard all that from Amelia and from Louise just now, so I won't mention it again. But we focus on things like anonymity and also making sure we protect your personal data and your company data. So we don't actually share amongst the companies in this platform. We aggregate the data, and you'll see that in the July conference. And then we've got some demographics. So the reason, what's the name of your organization? We'll capture that here. Size of the organization here. I'll have to pick one, so otherwise it won't let me go forward. And then we gather up some information about what type of business you're in. And then it'll ask you for a if you press other, it'll ask you to fill in something here. So I'll put in HR services. Okay, and then it'll ask you what level you are. We can pick a 1 or 2, and then that's it for the questions, and let's get into the survey. So the first thing we do is just explain a little bit about how that it's anonymous. We repeat that a few times for obvious reasons. We then, if you think about what you've just seen from Louise's presentation, there are 4 areas, and there are 3 questions or 3 topics in each area. We've got 1 question to capture in each of these and end up with 24 questions in total. I think it's 10 to 20 minutes maximum to complete the exercise, I would guess. And we have 5 descriptors. So we've heard a little bit about the different labels. So if you just scroll down on this right-hand side, you'll see what are the definitions of inactive, reactive, proactive, and progressive. And you can keep that on the screen as we go through the questions so that you can just reflect back on that. So first category is strategy up here, and then we've got some questions about leadership and accountability. What I will do is I'll just quickly go through these, and I won't adjust the topics. The next one is organization structure, which is the 3rd one here. And each of those questions give you a little bit of a, so we've got diversity forums, employee resource groups or similar being established, proactive, inactive, etc. If I just skip to the end, just so I show you a little bit about that. So there's 24 questions, around 15 to 20 minutes to complete. And when we get to the end, you'll see what your score is. Because I didn't move anything, you've obviously, everything's in the middle. And then we invite you to share an insight. And that means what area would you like to focus on? So we're just going to ask you a question that you'd be prepared to share with your fellow EDI leaders. And that gets captured in this area here under insights. So you can see what people have written last year. I won't go back to that because it's probably best if we continue. I'm going to keep my insight private, and you can see what others have said last year, and you can like and interact with them. So the last thing we can offer you here is to download your own data. So once you've completed the survey, there's often a request, so can you remind me what did we say this year, last year? So you can export your data into a spreadsheet that you can keep here. This is only you can take your own data. And then when we do our reporting, we aggregate all the data together to report as a whole organization. So that's a little bit, it's asking me to skip because I haven't commented on something, I think. But that's pretty much what we've got. I'll write in here cognition because it doesn't like me until I've done that. So we go all the way to the end again, and I can finish and or export my data here. So that's a little bit about the index, a little bit about how the tool works. And then once we've gathered up all the inputs, it'll be open. The survey will be issued around the 1st of April, not an April Fool, so don't be fooled. So we might, around that date, it'll be open for 2 to 3 weeks, that you'll get reminders regularly to explain, can you please fill it in or whatever. We won't hassle you too much. If you fill it in, it'll disappear, and we'll then gather that up into the data. I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any. I'll stop sharing here for now. And if there's any questions, I see there's something in the chat there.
Yeah, we'll pick up on that in a second, Colin. Thank you for sharing the demo. Just to outline those next steps, Amelia, if you could share the slide. So as Colin's just touched on, we go live with the submissions to the EDI Health Index on the 1st of April. This is your opportunity to get involved. You can register your organisation to participate in the EDI Health Index by the 17th of March by following the link that Amelia has just now shared on the slide. So if you go to the energyedihub.uk website, the registration process is there for you. You've got until the 17th of March to register, and as Colin's just outlined, you'll be sent a link to participate on the 1st of April, and then you've got through to the 20th of April. and Cognition will send you regular reminders if you've registered to complete by that time frame. And as we did last year, we'll be sharing the results of this and also the inclusion measurement framework for energy at the EDI conference in July. So, opportunity for Q&A. We do have a question in the Q&A. So I asked a question around, there's a lot of work around the sector on all things EDI, which includes ENA, Energy Networks Association, the Roundtable, Powerful Women, Tide, etc. So how do all of these groups work together? Amelia, do you want to start a response on that one?
Yeah, so first things first, I think it's really important because I think what's being talked about is how we're not kind of overloading and focus and trying to all use the same resource across the piece. And I think that was one of the founding principles of Tide, is that what it wanted to do was bring together all of these existing organizations, and ENA being actually part of the founding membership and of Tide itself. And the thinking was that this was about kind of bringing together spaces. It's, for example, when you talk about Powerful Women, that's very focused on obviously gender, but bringing together a bit more of an overall picture without overburdening people and without duplicating efforts. Now, that's so much so actually that in the last year, Tide has actually rationalized some of its activity to make sure that we aren't duplicating efforts. And that's so really the focus of Tides at the moment is in that this either the space that we've talked about today, which is that data collection space in the two initiatives that we've talked about, the health index and also the data collection that the EU skills. And then also about just sharing best practice. And often that means actually pointing people towards existing sources of information, resources, rather than actually trying to create something new and put an extra burden on people to kind of collect that themselves. So hopefully that's kind of kicks off. But if Louise, if you've got anything to add to that.
To add, so one of the premises, as Amelia's just talked about, of Tide was to share best practice. So it will signpost. So that EDI, Energy EDI Hub website does signpost to lots of other things. Powerful Women have been part of Tide as well. And they've got, as Amelia's talked about, that very clear vision and goal. Also to recognise the ENA do use the Tide Health Index and also use the inclusion measurement framework for their measurement. So there's lots of connectivity in and around, all trying to work towards the same very diverse and inclusive energy sector. So you're right, there is lots around, but certainly what Tide have tried to do is to recognise where the gaps were and build and leverage on those other networks in and around the energy sector as well. So hopefully you will see the connectivity rather than duplication to what organisations like ENA and Powerful Women are doing.
There was a request to share the deck, which I'm sure we can do. So that.
Yes, it will be, and also be pointed towards on the Tide LinkedIn channel, I'm sure. So it's both on the hub and through the LinkedIn. So keep an eye out for that.
Yeah, and to reflect, so some of the communications coming up, obviously we'll do lots of reminders relating to participation in the Tide Health Index, but it is supported by Ofgem, by Energy Networks Association, by Energy UK and the Energy Institute. So the chief executives from those organisations are very much a supporter of this. So hopefully that tries to identify that it is all connected and those four organisations as key stakeholders, and I'm very interested in the results.
So it looks as though that was the only question we've received. Unless anyone wants to raise their hand, make any last minute submissions to the Q&A or the chat. In which case, I think there's nothing much more to say other than to thank everyone for taking part today, and thank you very much for our panelists too. Should be on the screen now, the link to the LinkedIn, that if you want to join the Tide LinkedIn, so you can follow some of the activity that's happening there. And also in the chat itself, there is the link to where to register for the health index. And we really hope that as many people as we can to get involved, because the more people we've got involved, the better picture we get and the more that we can do with that data. So other than to thank the other panelists, thank you very much. I think that's everything.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye.
Good day, everyone.